Hello everyone, this is part 46 of What If Naruto and Hinata trained together and a spark happened, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. 7 individuals moved through the forest as quickly as they could, while still maintaining a high level of stealth. Unfortunately, 2 of the adults were not particularly skilled, and the most talented and experienced of group carefully carried the soul child, hindering her movements as well. The shortest adult of the troop kept his left hand against his ear, as they slipped around the trees, trying to avoid the undergrowth as much as possible. The remaining 2 members of the troop did their best to wipe out the scents and tracks of their comrades. Damn, Jinji cursed softly, resisting the impulse to rip off the hidden grass shield and bandana that covered his bald pate. His arm dropped back to his side, as he stopped listening to the earbud. I am Echo. Squad 2 is, he called out quietly to their leader, then paused, looking at the semi-conscious girl in the Jonan's arms, gone. It's just us, and Squad 3, now. And 3 is still 50 clicks from the land of air. The good news is that it sounded like the rogues who took down Squad 2 are going after Squad 3. The bad news is that entering the land of rain doesn't appear to be making them pause at all. They must think we are taking His Majesty to the land of air, the beauty said, though there was no relief in her voice. That means there is only 2 sets of 10 of the traitors' mercenaries coming after us right now. 20 on 4. The young woman wore a tradition ninja uniform and a chunin vest, instead of her faux civilian clothing. Her hybrid punching daggers were sheathed openly at her belt. Her head and hands remained uncovered, and her gradient-colored hair was pulled into a loose ponytail and tucked into the back of her collar to keep it out of her way. She raised her hand to call for a brief rest. The other 3 shinobi arrayed themselves around their leader and the 3 charges, as Ayameko stepped closer the 33-year-old man they were escorting, so they could speak in relative privacy. Uncle, what do you want to do? She asked quietly. I would know your thoughts, he answered. We are less than 20 kilometers from the border of the land of fire, she explained, but with your family, we have only a small chance of outrunning our pursuers, even if we were to carry you and Aunt Hanako as well. And that assumes they won't follow us into fire territory. Given that the rain country didn't slow them down, we can hardly count on that to give them pause. On the other hand, though their combat prowess has been established, we don't know how skilled these mercenaries are as trackers, so it might be better to continue in stealth. Still, the longer we take, the greater the chance they will run into us by chance. We shall split the difference, he decided. We will increase our speed, but to a comfortable jog, not to a full run. And your team will continue to do your best to conceal our trail. She nodded, and quickly indicated their new orders to her subordinates. Jinji took point position again, and the refugees started moving forward more quickly. But before they had been jogging another 15 minutes, the 4 shinobi all noticed a decline in the natural sounds of the forest, too great to be caused by the careful passage of the group. Ninja arts? Usagi no Mimi, Ayameko whispered, shifting her position from behind her aunt and uncle to guard their left side. Her ears began to pull in more sounds, and she frowned as she pinpointed the other disturbance. We have 5 humans incoming, she informed the others. Better than 20, the other kunoiki murmured. Stay sharp, Jinji barked lightly. 5, 10, or 20, they are still a threat, especially given the circumstances. Ayameko suppressed an urge to smile happily. Since his encounter with Naruto Uzumaki, the tech ninja had become far more focused in his training and his missions, and much less reliant on gadgets. But even as she thought that, Jinji took out an infrared motion scanner, signed a jutsu to increase the device's range, and pointed it in the direction where his superior was focusing her own detection technique. Given their search pattern, he whispered, I don't think they have our exact position. At least, not yet. But they are getting closer. I can't tell how they are tracking us, their movements are too erratic. I think we can still evade them if we turn south. But how far south? The other male ninja asked dubiously. We could end up heading for the rain instead of the fire, and run into the enemies searching for Squad 3. I calculate if we deviate 5 degrees to the south, the electronics expert explained, we should be able to avoid them, without seriously impacting the time we will cross over into Hidden Leaf territory. Does that match with what you are hearing, Ayameko? Stop, she hissed even more quietly, skidding silently to a halt. The others paused and closed ranks nervously. The gradient-haired Jonan turned in the direction Jinji had indicated, her forehead wrinkling in concentration and concern. Just as she was about to relax, she caught another hint of what had made her hesitate. More of them, to the southeast, she stated, I think they are driving us into a trap. Jinji swung his scanner around, refocusing his chakra to help the machine draw in more data. He grimaced at the results. They got ahead of us, he agreed, they have set up a loose line between us and the land of fire. If we try to break the net, and they will close in on us like a squid. What are our options? Their client asked, glad for the genjutsu that was keeping his daughter dozing. We can go after the 5 trying to drive at us, and hope we can take them out and run before the reinforcements arrive, Ayameko answered, or we can charge through their formation, and hope we can escape before they surround us. There is another option, the other kunoichi said darkly, the 2 of us can draw them away, so you and Jinji can get the daimyo and his family to safety. Ayameko started to protest, but the kunoichi held up her hand. We all know how opposed you are to S missions, Lady Ayameko. The slightly younger woman could not repress a proud smile, especially after the last skirmish, but this is our best chance. Maybe we won't get caught, her sacrificial partner noted, after all, we will be able to run much faster on our own. Ayameko let her breath escape soundlessly, and looked to her uncle. The recently deposed leader of the Land of Grass shrugged helplessly. All right, the Jonan conceded sadly. Then her hazel eyes hardened and her speaking volume rose slightly as she instructed, but don't d. Your job is to lead them away from us. Avoid fighting unless you have no other choice. We can't afford to lose anyone else. Yes, ma'am, the teen kunoichi grinned at her leader. She grabbed her male counterpart's arm said, let's do this, kid. I wish you would stop that, he groused as they started to jog to the northeast. You're only 14 months older than me, and we're the same. They both started to argue loudly and stopped masking their footsteps, as they disappeared into the brush. Don't oversell it, Jinji admonished disparagingly. He continued to swing the scanner steadily back and forth, while the remaining 5 refugees waited. Jinji-san, what is the range on that device? The daimyo's wife asked, trying to use her curiosity to mask her fear. Normally, 500 meters, Highness, he answered, not removing his eyes from the display, but my jutsu boosts it to 5 clicks, kilometers. But I don't want to keep it going too long, it is a draining technique. She nodded and they resumed waiting in silence. After a few minutes, the bald Chunin perked up. It looks like they did it, he told his leader and clients. The brush beaters are turning towards them, and most of the mercs from the net are moving to the north. Too bad they aren't totally stupid. They left 7 of the 15 blockers behind, but they are more spread out now. We should be able to break through, there. He tapped the screen and then pointed the scanner in a direction slightly north from their original course. Ayameko leaned over his shoulder and looked at the display. Then she shook her head. That's a trap, she announced, watching their movements on the scanner. They suspect we have split up, and are giving us an opening. Those 2 are too far apart, and the warriors on the ends are angling towards that spot. It's where they want us to break through. No, our best bet is here. She indicated a spot where 2 of their enemies were fairly close together. There. The daimyo frowned, we'll never be able to slip through there. We won't sneak past, Ayameko explained, Jinji and I will kill them. He looked astonished and the she quickly continued. These 2 are out of position, and shuffling about, like they are nervous, she continued, and they keep telegraphing the location of the trap. Those 2 are inexperienced, so if we hit them fast enough, we should be able to take them out before they can raise an alarm. With both of them out of the way, it will give us a large gap to escape through. Unless that's the trap, Hanako stated anxiously. No, I don't think so, Ayameko shook her head, checking Jinji's scanner again. They don't have enough troops to properly reinforce that position if we hit them there. We cannot afford to wait too long, the Grass Royal agreed. Darling, we should trust Ayameko's experience. The woman nodded, and the Jonan passed the young girl to her father. We'll get within the unassisted range of the scanner, and then Jinji and I will split off and clear the path. Then you can follow us. Jinji, take lead again. The Chunan's bandana-covered pate bobbed, and he darted forward, just under the jogging speed of the daimyo's wife. The royals scrambled after the tech specialist unsteadily, but without hesitation. Ayameko waited a moment, her still-enhanced ears picking up the sounds of battle to their north. She hid her frown, and followed. After they reached the ordained position, Jinji handed the scanner to the daimyo, and Ayameko passed the child to her mother, before they raced off towards their respective targets. Jinji slunk forward, keeping his already slight form close to the ground. As he drew in range, he had the crossbow attached to his right wrist. Even though he no longer used the jutsu circuits, he still felt more comfortable with his forearms covered, and had found the projectile to be a suitable replacement. He selected a bolt tipped with a powerful paralytic, and slipped into place. He sighted carefully and fired. Easy enough, he frowned, wondering briefly why this opponent had been so much weaker than the last groups he had fought. The lovely Jonan dropped silently behind her target, using a simple crafting of wind chakra to both slow and mask her descent from the foliage. Her opponent seemed to hear her despite her efforts, and started to turn, but was too late. What about Jinji? Hanako asked fearfully. My solid fog jutsu negated the fire chakra in the bombs, the Chunin announced as he loped up to them. Thanks for the warning, senpai. For all the good that does, the male royal said dubiously. Maybe it does. Ayameko pulled them towards Jinji's return path. As they broke into a sprint, she continued. Jinji managed to stop his target from self-D. If they do not find his body or notice his absence, they won't be looking for us at his position. If we time it right, we can. I found them. A shout rang out from far to close, and the sounds of feet heedlessly trampling the brush reached them. Aunt Hanako, climb on, the Jonan instructed, kneeling down partway. Jinji, carry my His Majesty. With no time for propriety, the two nobles clambered onto the ninjas' backs, and the warriors took off. But weighted down by their charges, neither shinobi could reach full speed. And even without a jutsu, they could hear the hunters gaining on them. We aren't going to escape, the technically minded Chunin stated. I am open to suggestions, Ayameko panted slightly as she said it. There are only 5 of them, Jinji opened, so we find an advantageous location, and take him out. Before we get too tired. Then, we might be able to get away before any more of them show up. Ayameko took a moment to consider it, and then nodded. Over there, she inclined her head towards a break in the woods, bordered by a pair of especially large oaks. The two shinobi altered course slightly, and entered the clearing. The ancient trees had wrapped around one another, leaving a hollow between them at ground level. The Jonan headed over to natural alcove, and deposited her niece. You 3 stay here, she said softly, as her aunt and uncle climbed down. The royals settled in, covering the daughter with their own bodies. Ayameko extracted her chameleon tarp, and used it to conceal them, spreading some leaves and dirt over the camouflaged blanket. Then she took up position next to Jinji in the middle of the clearing. The tech ninja was holding a kunai in his left hand, and rubbing his left forearm with his empty hand. If there is a later, she frowned as though rose in her mind, unbidden. Don't worry, Meko-chan, Jinji grinned, ceasing his massage of his wrist, we got this. I don't recall giving you permission to refer to me like that, she snapped. Give her a lure, and suddenly she's all about propriety, he groused, but then smiled apologetically. Still she did not relax, and he sobered. How long have you known this was coming? The rebellion? He asked quickly, noticing the unmasked footsteps of their pursuers growing closer. Since the land of birds, she answered, tensing, I didn't believe our leader when he gave us those medals. Since then, I've felt like he was keeping an eye on me. And when I received my lure, I knew my uncle was seeing it, too. If she had anything more to say, it was cut off when 5 figures burst into the clearing. All were covered head to toe by stealth shozaku, identical except for the colors. Even their eyes were covered by tinted lenses. Of 5 shizokas, 2 wore green, and 1 each wore tan, blue, and red. They quickly slowed to a stop, and started looking around. Where are the other 2? The red renegade asked, seemingly unaware of the youngest royal. The grass ninjas did not answer. You were seen carrying 2 other people on your backs, he insisted. Where is the daimyo, Lady Ayameko? My uncle is on his way to the land of air, the beauty insisted evenly. I doubt that, the blue-garbed rogue scoffed. Give him to us, and you may go, the red warrior said, after glancing at his talkative comrade. Even though they could not see his face, the ninjas could tell he was annoyed. Even if we could, we wouldn't, Jinji shot back, we have honor. As expect, the red Shozaku nodded in agreement, them, continue the search. While he said that, he signed for the weapon summoning jutsu, and an iron and bronze gladius materialized in his hand as he jumped at Ayameko. One of the green warriors joined him, and the other three charged the bald ninja. Jinji raised his left arm, wrist out, his knuckles whitening as he tightened his grip on his kunai until it hurt. Spark Javelin's jutsu. The second mark down on the inside row of scars on Jinji's forearm glowed brightly, and for an instant a pattern of tiny lines blazed under the burn. 5 spears of lightning shot out, killing the tan and green Shizokis instantly, but the navy-clad warrior managed to avoid the attack, while drawing his own gladius. The grass tech ninja stopped grinding his teeth as the pain passed, and caught the shortsword on his spade-shaped dagger. Ayameko's 2 opponents swung matched swords at her, and she blocked one blade with each of her weapons. The Jonin quickly appraised her opponents. They both showed about the same level of speed, and green-garbed mercenary was stronger, while the red-masked leader was more skilled. He twisted his gladius, trying to force both of her weapons out of the way so that his teammate could get an open shot at her left side. Ayameko dropped down into a full split, withdrawing her weapons. The clashing gladiuses sailed free, and while the red warrior was able to control his blade, the green attacker's greater strength and lesser skill kept his shortsword moving, to the point where he nearly hit his teammate. Ayameko rolled back, and as she did, swung her heels upwards, clipping the emerald Shozaku's calf lightly, but missing the scarlet one completely. As she regained her stance, she clapped her hands together, managing a septet of quick finger seals around the hilt of her blades. Kaiten, molten blades jutsu, she exhaled, and the edges of her 2-part daggers turned red, then yellow, and finally blazing white with heat. Jinji transferred his kunai to his right hand, holding the blue Shozaku at bay. He pointed his left arm at his opponent again, and the mercenary scrambled back. The grass chunin grinned and tossed his kunai after the retreating hunter. While the navy warrior shifted his stance again to avoid the dagger, the tech specialist signed his real attack. Dotten, mud-slick jutsu, he intoned, and the grass around his opponent turned into a pit of viscous muck. As the bandit's foot hit the altered earth, it went in wrong direction. Although he was able to keep his knee and hip from twisting, avoiding injury caused him to stumble. The grass loyalist pointed his scars at the renegade again, and announced, Stone Spears Jutsu. The 5th inside brand on his arm flared, and he grimaced again, but the ground erupted with rocky spikes, impaling the prone Shozaku repeatedly. These guys are weaker than the last group, Jinji frowned dubiously. Then the first 2 corpses exploded, and in the aftermath, the navy-masked soldier was instead a smoldering, broken log. Substitution. The computer expert tensed, waiting for the counterattack. Ayameko's right-hand dagger sliced through the green warrior's gladius, leaving the edges softened and dripping. But the red fighter enacted a quick earth jutsu, hardening his blade against the heat. The green Shozaku tilted his head to stare at his damaged weapon, giving Ayameko the chance to bury her heel in his throat while she trapped the scarlet renegade sword with her blades. The less skilled fighter crumbled, unconscious but still breathing, if harshly. The remaining attacker seemed to grimace under his hood, and struggled to free his gladius. Ayameko prepared to launch another kick at her foe, but he released his weapon, twisting out of her reach and signing instead. Why stop me just to K me? He grunted in confusion. Time, she answered, and then shouted, Jinji, water release. Still casting about carefully for the escaped blue Shozaku, Jinji sent chi into his arm, lighting up another of his scars. Suten, solid fog jutsu, he incanted with a grimace, and a dense mist filled the clearing. The water chakra negated the paper bombs of the dying red warrior, and allowed the 2 grass shinobi to spot the form of the concealed merc. Both started to close on him, when a sudden burst of wind swept the fog away into the forest. As the jutsu vanished, Ayameko suddenly tensed. There were 11 more Shizokis bounding the edge of the clearing, most in blue, but with 2 reds and 1 gray. The gray Shozaku was female, judging by the silhouette of her uniform, and she took a step closer. I suppose expecting you to win again that S-rank Jonin and her enhanced pet was too much, The renegade stated in a high, clear voice, but at least you managed to hold them until we arrived, Sergeant. The only active member of the first group slumped in relief, and as he started back towards his allies, said, "Thanks, Captain." "K them, find the daimyo," she ordered, ignoring the talkative renegade. "Jinji, rapid fire," Ayameko ordered with a hint of desperation. The Chunin raised his arm, and 4 of the scars started to light up. But the gray Shozaku reacted faster. Ninja art, jutsu sealing. 3 strips of paper shot out and wrapped around Jinji's forearm. The tech ninja howled lightly in pain as his chakra was arrested and the glow under the tags vanished. "Did my words not lead you to the conclusion we had been briefed on your irregularity?" The lead rogue asked, sounding mildly insulted. "Normally jutsu sealing need to be used on an area that contains the entire ninja, but those scars are the whole jutsu, so I just need to cover them to negate them." Jinji glanced at his superior, and noticed she was holding herself weakly. He recognized it as a sign of exhaustion. His friend and ally was fast and strong, but only possessed average endurance. And she had been carrying her young cousin most of the day. Now, the gray-clad woman barked, and her troops surged forward. "Ninja art, shadow seal web." A mildly annoyed voice carried over them. The shadows of the mid-afternoon sun broke around them, forming an inky seal beneath each of the mercenaries. The hexagonal traps met at the edges, supporting one another, and the 12 shizokas were frozen in place. The grass warriors turned to look behind them, and saw 6 figures in the large oaks, though one of them was being carried. "Hit, M. Choi," Anko Mitarashi ordered, and the large Tokujo jumped out the tree, already forming his 10th hand sign. "Ninja art, mind annihilation jutsu," Ino Yamanaka snapped. The gray Shozaku unwittingly met the younger woman's eyes, and even through her tinted lenses, the mental attack connected. She let out a pitiable whimper, and collapsed to the grass. "Suten, dousing rain jutsu," Anko announced, and a sudden, swift downpour covered them all, ending the dull hissing under the dead Shizoka's uniforms. Choji stopped spinning, and his clones vanished. Lady Ayameko, the other grass kunoiki, leapt out of the trees, still carrying her unconscious partner. "You two are okay," the tired Jonin sighed happily. "Yes, thanks to these leaf ninjas," she answered, as the rest of Team Anko joined them on the ground. "They saved us. It's a good thing you guys made enough noise for us to track you down." The leaf Jonin sounded more sarcastic than thankful, adding, "Where's the daimyo?" Ayameko shook her head, not to sound ungrateful, "But why are you here?" "You asked Daimyo Haruna if she could send the Flower Clan to back you up." Anko did not seem upset by the suspicion. "She couldn't, so instead she asked the Hokage to send someone to make sure you and her cousin, the Grass Daimyo, made it to the Land of Fire. I'm sure you would have been more comfortable if it had been Sakura Haruno who showed up, but she's busy, and the Hokage figured it was more likely the insurgents would try to impersonate her, so you get us, instead." "Anything else?" The Grass Jonin exhaled in release. "You can come out, Uncle," the gradient-haired beauty announced, and the tarp shifted, revealing the now wet and shivering royals. "Your Highness," Anko bowed slightly, and kept her voice as respectful as she could, "we are here to escort you to the Hidden Leaf Village." "Thank you for coming, Lady Ayameko," the Hokage greeted the younger woman cordially. "I know you are anxious to get your daimyo to the capital so he can meet with our daimyo, but I was hoping you could tell me more about what has transpired in the Land of Grass." The Sannin observed the Grass Jonin intently. Ayameko had traded her shozaku and vest for her normal blouse and skirt, and her multi-hued hair was loose instead of her standard braid. Sunit clinically recognized the beauty of her guest's slim, straight nose, slightly plump cheeks, and full lips, while also reading the worry and sadness in the other kunoiki's wide hazel eyes. The Konohagakore's file on the Grass Daimyo's shinobi niece painted the picture of a talented young woman, whose skill was only eclipsed by her kindness and loyalty to her family. Her K count was far below the norm for a Jonin, especially given her extensive list of completed missions. Sakura Haruno had confirmed that, describing how well Ayameko had fought. "Of course, Lady Sunid," the blue and purple-haired kunoiki bowed deeply. "It is the least I can do, in return for the Hidden Leaf's gracious intercession on behalf of my team and my family." The leaf leader waved her hand towards the chairs on the far side of her desk, and the grass kunoiki sat gracefully. "Lady Ayameko." Sunid started again, but the other woman held up her hand to interrupt. "Please, there is no need to be so formal," Ayameko stated, her tone and phrasing at odds with her words. Milo was mainly for show, and arguably no longer applies. Besides, I am merely a jonin, while you are the one of the 5 cages. Fine, the elder woman grinned sarcastically, as long as you cut the crap, too. Ayameko inclined her head regally, before smiling slightly, and relaxing into the chair. So, Ayameko-san, what's happening in the land of grass? Tsunade asked neutrally. What do you know? The gradient-haired hair noble asked. Let's pretend I know nothing, the Hokage countered. I want to get your point of view, uncolored by what you think I know. All right, Ayameko nodded, conceding the point. Well, on the surface, it appears to be a simple civil war. My uncle, the daimyo, is the youngest of 3 siblings. My mother is his elder sister, and they both have an older brother. My older uncle never wanted to rule, he is content being an artist, and my mother was afraid our country would not accept a female daimyo, so she stepped aside for her younger brother. Tsunade nodded, remembering Sakura and Naruto's reports about Toki and Haruna's complaints and suspicions. The problems is, or rather appears to be, that my elder uncle's first son is not content to be a mere noble, he wants to be daimyo. He supposedly used the daimyo's failure to annex the land of greens to cast doubt on his fitness to rule. 9 days ago, shinobi working for my cousin tried to the daimyo. They failed, but in the process our country was divided and war erupted. You keep using qualifiers, the Hokage interrupted, appears to be, supposedly. What do you think is really going on? My cousin is a puppet, the younger jonin answered confidently, he is not smart enough to have arranged this on his own. You may have heard the story, about how 4 years ago he attended the Chunin exams here, and ordered his bodyguards to intimidate or stall Gaara of the Sand. He hoped to cause Gaara to lose his fight with Sasuke Uchiha. Instead, he got both of his bodyguards killed. No, I believe the leader of the Kasagakure is the one who wants to seize control of our country. At first, the village hidden in the grass was divided into 3 camps, those who support my uncle, those who support my cousin, and the majority who felt we should let the nobles fight their own battles without taking sides. The shinobi and samurai on both sides were more or less equal in number and skill. But then those Shizokas started attacking us, and our leader started to convince our comrades who had not taken sides to support the usurper. He said that with the help of the mercenaries, my uncle's defeat was inevitable. Not surprisingly, my former comrades decided that they would rather fight for the stronger side than risk any sort of fallout for their neutrality. Ayameko sighed in disappointment, and the Hokage silently agreed with the sentiment. After that, things grew continually worse, the grass kunoiki concluded. Although we have never seen more than 100 Shizokas at one time, no matter how many we killed, they were always replaced. And as we lost troops and territory, more of the holdouts defected to the renegade side. 5 days ago, it became obvious we could no longer win without outside help. So I contacted daimyo Haruna, and asked for the assistance of her ninja clan. We waited 3 days, but when we did not receive any sort of response, I assumed my message had been intercepted. When the rebels began to close in on the daimyo's palace, we were able to convince my uncle to flee, if only for the sake of his wife and daughter. We sent out 5 teams of 8 shinobi, each escorting 2 or 3 loyal nobles. My uncle sent them to counties who were not our enemies, both for safety and to try to gain assistance. But the traitors were able to track us down, though they made the Shizokas do the dirty work. I lost half of my team in an early attack. Only Team 3 made it through unscathed. The other were all wiped out. What about your parents? Tsunade asked, both out of concern for her guest and because she needed to learn the fate of the grass daimyo's sister for political reasons. They were in the land of greens when this all started, the exhausted beauty admitted gratefully, along with my youngest sister. They will remain there, for the time being. You don't think that will put a target on the land of greens? Tsunade prompted cannily, after all, that was one of the excuses for ousting the daimyo. When we fled, Ayameko grinned slightly. My uncle ordered most of his remaining samurai and ninjas to sneak into the land of greens, and place themselves at the command of my mother and daimyo Haruna. That's not even 20% of our original forces, but added to that the Flower Ninja clan, and daimyo Haruna's strategic alliance with the Land of Birds and her close relationship with both the Leaf and Stone villages. My former leader would have to be a total fool to attack the Land of Greens. At least before he has some time to regroup and requip. Speaking of, Tsunade began carefully, why didn't your uncle request help? Especially when it became obvious that the rebels were hiring troops for outside the land of grass. Pride, fear, old grudges and rivalries, the younger beauty shrugged apologetically, take your pick. Tsunade considered that the grass country had been a battleground between the stone and leaf ninjas during the Third Great Ninja War. Despite the grass village being one of the 3 second-tier shinobi outposts, they could not stand against the wrath of 2 of the great villages at once. The Hokage could understand why the grass daimyo had been hesitant to put himself in another similar situation. So, the Hokage switched topics smoothly, offering the refugee a respite. I am told your teammate, Jinji, has some interesting marks on him. You mean the scars Naruto gave him? Ayameko raised an eyebrow at the veiled query. So they are the same. The healer considered that. I suppose you probably don't want to talk about that. There isn't much to talk, the grass Jonin shrugged. Even though they finally admitted their circuits themselves were not viable, our scientists tried to recreate what Naruto did to Jinji. But they failed again. They couldn't decide if it was something about the specific jutsu he used, or because of the demon Naruto used to carry. Tsunade nodded. The medic considered the possibility that the neurological nature of the Ranshinsho was responsible for the scars still acting as jutsu circuits. But it doesn't matter much, Ayameko continued, each scar is a single technique that Jinji can use, so they lack the flexibility of the original coat design. And they cause him a great deal of pain to activate. It's a testimony to his pain threshold that he can use them as much as he does. What do you intend to do now? The Sannin asked, after taking a moment to digest the information. Your daimyo has offered us sanctuary, so I will accompany my uncle to your capital. Ayameko started out strongly, but then trailed off into uncertainty. From there, I don't know what we will do. We have heard some other rumors of odd goings on, which might limit the assistance we can hire. And unless we can do something about the Shizokas, I don't know if we have the power to take back our country. Well, if there is anything the Hidden Leaf can do to help you, don't hesitate to contact us, the Hokage said kindly. Then she smirked, and added, I'll give you 10% off our normal fees. So that's what saving one of your shinobi and 2 daimyos allied with your country is worth. The noble Kunoiki asked with only a hint of sarcasm. No, that's worth 20%, Tsunade snarked back, but since I did just save you, 3 of your teammates and 3 grass country nobles, free of charge, I figured we were even on that count. Thank you, Ayameko said sincerely, for everything you have done. And I will keep your offer in mind. Tsunade stood up and extended her hand, and Ayameko followed suit. The 2 women exchanged a firm handshake, and the younger shinobi turned and left. Shizune, the Hokage called for her assistant, and the other medic entered the office. Yes, milady. Please send for the clan leaders and Might Guy, she instructed, I need to speak with them immediately. The events unfolding making me think we may need a large-scale mobilization soon. I want to explain the situation to them, so I can get their feedback and so they can prepare. Right away, Shizune frowned, wondering why her mentor had asked for Guy in addition to the heads of the shinobi families. But she had the impression it was not the time to ask, so she hurried back to her desk, calling for messengers as she jotted down a note for each leader, containing the Fire Shadow's wishes. Each missive was written specifically based on its recipient, most receiving a polite request, while Might Guy and Shikaku Nara were given strict orders as to when they were to arrive. After checking the missives a second time, she handed them to ninjas on messenger duty along with the delivery instructions. When the Hokage and Shizune entered the conference room 30 minutes later, the leaders of the 9 active shinobi clans of the Konohagakure were all waiting. In addition, Hinata Hyuga was seated next to her father, and in the corner of the room furthest from the door stood Might Guy. The bowl-haired Jonin looked somewhat uncomfortable, and a few of the clan leaders looked at him suspiciously. Where are Kakashi and Naruto? Tsunade whispered harshly to her apprentice. They declined, Shizune murmured back. Naruto says he's not officially a clan leader yet, and he doesn't even have a clan to lead. And Kakashi's response pointed out that he rejected the position of acting head of the Uchiha clan, and that he was already going to be late getting to his class. Fine, the last Senju growled under her breath. Then she faced the assembled clan leaders sternly, masking her annoyance under a facade of professionalism. I have been called to a meeting of the Conclave of Shadows, she announced, burying a spike of worry at the summons. After she had given her instructions to Shizune, the wall in her office had lit up, showing a request by the Reikage for a special meeting of the 5 leaders. However, unlike the immediate session she had asked for upon Naruto's the lightning shadow had offered the others 1 hour to prepare. Tsunade could not help but wonder what Goro Yotsuki was up to. So we will need to keep this brief, she concluded as she sat down. She glared at Guy briefly, who finally followed suit. I'm sure all of you are aware to some degree of the renegade group calling themselves by the uninspired name, Shizokus, she began, glancing around for their reactions. None of the clan leaders betrayed any surprise or confusion, and she continued. Up until now, they have been acting merely as bandits, and there was some suspicions that they were only testing the strength of the various hidden villages. Now those rumors have been proven. Recently the Shizokus have stepped up their activities, and are showing greater numbers than we previously experienced. This caused a small shuffling around the table, but as soon as expected, neither Inoki Yamanaka nor Shikaku Nara seemed surprised by her statement. 2 weeks ago, the nephew of the daimyo of the Land of Grass and the leader of the Hidden Grass village launched a coup d'état, which in only 2 days escalated into a full civil war. 8 days ago, the rebels hired the Shizokus, gaining themselves 100 mercenaries as reinforcements. 3 days ago, the rebels broke the loyalists' lines. The daimyo and the nobles on his side evacuated, splitting into 5 groups. 1 group fled to each of the nations around the grass country. Only 2 made it through. Finally, the daimyo sent his remaining soldiers and ninjas to the Land of Greens. She paused to catch her breath and to observe them again. This time, she saw she had also rattled Inoki. She wondered if the Mind Reader clan's information network had been compromised. She cleared her throat, and waited for the clan heads to settle down again. Unfortunately, that's not all, she indicated Guy. Earlier this week, the hidden waterfall village was attacked by Kisame Hoshigaki and Bunjiro Egaru, leading an estimated force of 200 of the Shizokus. At Shibuki's request, I sent Mike Guy's team to help evacuate the waterfall's children. Rock Lee and Neji Hyuga are both still recovering from the injuries they received during the mission. As of our last intelligence, the waterfall will not survive tomorrow, if they are still fighting now. We are preparing troops to assist them, despite that fool's insistence we take no action beyond the rescue mission. If they are working with Kisame, does that mean these Shizokus are connected to the Akatsuki? Choza Akamaki pondered aloud. That's possible, but unlikely, Shikaku disagreed with his former teammate. Kisame severed ties with the Akatsuki, Hinata pointed out. The patriarchs and matriarchs turned to look at her, and she flinched. True, Tsunade agreed, and the Akatsuki essentially disbanded. But we know that Pain, Konan, and Madara are still working together, and as Pain's plan to harness the 9 Bayu is no longer possible, that shark would have nothing to fear from working with them. It's possible the 2 broken swords merely hired the Shizokus to carve out their own little kingdom, Inoki mused. That would explain why they chose a water-aligned nation to conquer. I was hoping to have more time to discuss this with all of you, the Hokage nodded, the mentalist having discerned one of her own trains of thought, but I suddenly do not have that choice. Instead I have 2 requests of you. First, please call on your informants again. Find out everything you can about the current states of the grass and waterfall countries. Also, since they are now moving more openly and in greater numbers, see if you can learn anything more about these Shizokus. Second, I want you to decide if you will support me, if I decide to send troops to the waterfall village, even though Shibuki said no. The men and women in the room frowned thoughtfully. Tsunade wished she could stay to influence their initial debate, but she did not have time. I'll leave you to it, she stood quickly and many of the clan heads followed suit. Shizune will stay, so she can relay any messages to me as soon as I return. She stepped hastily out of the room, breaking into a jog as soon as the door closed. Does anyone really plan to say we should not help the waterfall country? Saburo Takamaki asked dubiously and formally. They have not always been our allies in the past, but since Shibuki took over the Takagakure, things have been far more cordial. And more importantly, I do not think we can allow the mist traitors and these Shizokus to control one of our neighboring lands. Could be 2 countries in their pockets, Shikaku added, depending on how deep in the grass the mercenaries' hooks are. So, what do you think we should do, Hinata-san? The Yamanaka leader asked openly. The others mostly turned to look at the young guest, though a few shot the blonde Jonan confused or annoyed looks. Oh, the young woman quailed under the attention. Well, the Yamanakas and the Naras have the best spy networks, so I guess we should see what they can find out. Is that all? Sume Inuzuka didn't hide her disappointment. Hinata closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she exhaled, her eyes reappeared with new resolve. No, Hinata shook her head. If we intend to follow the Hokage's plan, we will need more direct information. We should pick the 4 members with the best stealth skills in each of the Inuzuka and Aburame clans, and send them as 2-man teams into the waterfall country. They should not go too far in, but can use their dogs and insects to get a better view of what is happening closer to the Takagakure. Her father nodded, as did Inoiki, but Hinata was not finished, and her cadence increased as she grew more confident of her suggestions. And we should send teams to reinforce the border. Hyugas to scan, and Akamaikas for their combat power, probably with a 3rd teammate, probably an equal split between members of the Takamaiki and Kuroikan families. They should be obvious, to discourage incursions. But then we should also send a few extra Hyuga and Inuzuka scouts in secret, to keep them honest. Then she trailed off, blushing furiously as she recognized they were all staring at her intently, and that she had all but given orders to the majority of the heads of the Hidden Leaf Shinobi clans. Anyone have any objections? Shikaku Nara asked sardonically, and there was a round of head shaking in the room. Good, that makes it less of a hassle, the lazy leader noted. We can start getting things ready, for when the Hokage gives us the go-ahead. Guy, what else did you learn in the waterfall village? Shibi Aburame queried softly. Well, Guy started grandly. You did well, Hinata. Hiashi Hyuga leaned over to whisper to his daughter. She could not help but notice his movements were still stiff and carefully controlled. I am proud of you, the injured leader added, and the pale beauty's smile spread slightly. Lady Hokage. Tsunade had nearly reached her office, when an Anbu member darted out to meet her. What is it? She snapped. I'm in a hurry. I bring an urgent message from the daimyo, the young shinobi said apologetically, and only then did she recognize the voice and mask of one of the ninjas set to guard the Land of Fire's ruler. Now, she frowned angrily, and snatched the letter. Then she forced her face into neutrality, and nodded to the animal-masked warrior. Thank you, she said, dismissing him. He bowed slightly and vanished. The Sannin raced the rest of the way into her office, and sealed it behind her. She read the short letter from Hisoka Honokata, her brow creasing with surprise and increased worry. She tucked the letter into her shirt, and went through the process of extracting the black candle from her desk. She enacted the ritual, and steeled herself, before entering the meeting room of the Conclave of Shadows. Sorry I'm late, Tsunade announced, her voice carefully emotionless. Gaara of the Sand, Yasuo Mizuno, and Mitsuru Jishin all turned to look at her, even as the latecomer noticed that Goro Yotsuki had not arrived yet. The Hokage closed her door, and settled regally into her chair, frowning. Goro called this meeting, and has the gall to keep us waiting, the Leaf Shinobi growled slightly, her grip on her feelings slipping. Do any of you know what this is about? She asked her comrades. The Mizukage and Tsuchikage shook their heads, but Gaara's brow creased in thought. I suspect the Reikage wants to discuss the recent actions of these renegades, the former Jinchuriki suggested. You may be correct, the stone Kunoiki rumbled, but it does not gain us much to speculate. Goro is far from predictable. If that's not why he called this meeting, I would still suggest. Yasuo's statement was cut off when the door leading to the Reikage's office finally opened. Before he could even step foot into the meeting hall, Tsunade lit into him. It's about damn time, Goro, she barked at the silhouette in the portal, echoing her earlier protest. You called us here, and then have the nerve to make us wait. My apologies for the delay, Tsunade-sensei, an unexpected voice attempted to pacify the Hokage. Its owner stepped into the underground room. He was tall and well-muscled, though only his shoulders could have been called bulky. His auburn hair was cropped short, and his sharp blue eyes regarded the 4 shadows with amused confidence. Like his brother and nephew, his nose was slightly stubbed, but it did not detract from the overall appeal of his face. He wore a matte black stealth shozaku, with a layer of blackened steel chainmail covering his vitals and also his wrist. His head was uncovered, but otherwise he wore the full regalia, including gloves and tabi. And, like the room's other inhabitants, he was unarmed. But Goro Yotsuki will not be joining us today, Guki Namikaze informed them, as he is no longer the Reikage. Nor, for that matter, is he alive. You, Tsunade snarled, leaping from her seat and preparing to charge her former student. The Mizukage also stood, though it was not clear whether he intended to try to stop the Hokage, or simply to get out of her way. You would attack the Raikage in the Conclave of Shadows chambers? Guki asked quickly, and the medic froze, a look of horror filling her hazel eyes. You claim to be the Lightning Shadow. The Tsuchikage's powerful voice echoed more than it should have in the small room. I did light the candle, Guki pointed out blandly, as he closed the door behind him, and I am sure you are all well aware of the Hidden Cloud Village's rules of succession. Each of the 5 villages had unique laws as to who could claim the La of Cage, and how to go about it. Both the Mist and Cloud villages allowed the La to be taken in single combat, though the Mizukage had been slowly working on changing that rule. But as the other 4 leaders considered that, Gaara was the first to notice the apparent flaw in Guki's assertion. The Hidden Cloud does allow any ninja to become Raikage, if he or she defeats the current Raikage in a duel, the red-haired youth reminded, but a foreign shinobi also requires a Cloud Jonin in good standing to sponsor his or her challenge. Who was your advocate, Guki? Tsunade demanded, already suspecting the answer. Yugito ni, he said simply, then he smiled as if remembering something sad. You see, she survived the extraction process, so the Akatsuki kept her prisoner, to study how she managed to live. A few months ago, I happened to rescue her. She told me her story, about how the Raikage was afraid of her power and popularity, so he all but sold her to the Akatsuki. I was outraged, and after I had nursed her back to health, she took me to the Cloud Village, and sponsored me as Goro's replacement. What an wonderful lie, the Hokage snarked, except that we know Yugito Nidi, and was brought back as part of pain. Even if such a thing were possible, Guki countered dubiously, it is awfully convenient that you kept it secret until now. It is much more likely you concocted that story to discredit me. We have proof, Tsunade countered. Proof? Guki sounded amused. What proof do you have that couldn't be faked with a simple transformation and a few lies? Is what you said about the previous Raikage true? Mitsuru interrupted softly, was Goro working with the Akatsuki? He was, Guki sobered, his voice carrying the weight of truth, though Tsunade was not thoroughly convinced, he really did think Yugito would attempt to replace him, so he allowed Hiden and Kakazu into the Kumogakur, took no action to defend Yugito, and launched only a perfunctory search for her after she was captured. He had a deal with Pain and Madara to assist them, in return for promises of safety and even additional power once all of the Bayou had been captured. Is that why you called us here, missing Nin? The Mizukage asked darkly, to announce your new position, and flaunt that there is nothing we can do about it. Informing the Conclave of Shadows that there is new Raikage is only the first reason I asked you here. Guki graciously ignored the insult. I also wish to discuss certain events unfolding in the ninja world right now. You mean the conflicts in the grass and waterfall countries, Gaara deduced. Namikaze inclined his head in agreement. At the request of the leaders of those countries, my personal troops have stepped in to help restore the peace, Guki said, his voice twinged with regret. Restore the peace. Yasuo snapped uncharacteristically, if the broken swords and those, Shizokus, really are working for you, you invaded the hidden waterfall village. Not at all, the Raikage said, unperturbed, the daimyo of the waterfall country came to us with proof that his shinobi village was plotting to him and take power. It is at his request that Kisame and Bunjiro took a portion of my troops to neutralize the threat. Feel free to contact the waterfall daimyo. Of course, by now even if he has never seen you before, he would be convinced that you are good friends, and that you saved him. Gaara could not keep a hint of anger from his normally impassive voice. It seems you are all determined to think the absolute worst of me. Namikaze sounded hurt, despite my good intentions. What about all the thefts by your Shizokus over the past 6 months? The Hokage shot back. Almost every hidden village has lost shinobi to those bandits you just admitted were your followers. It is impossible to demand total loyalty. Guki shook his head, something I'm sure you can all understand. A few thieves joined my cause under false pretenses, and then fell back into their old habits. It is unfortunate, but hardly preventable. Enough, Yasuo shouted, slamming his fist on the smooth stone table. I will not allow you to make a mockery, not of us and not of the people we serve. I put this proposal to the Conclave of Shadows, that we call for an immediate removal of all foreign shinobi from the grass and waterfall countries, and demand the Hidden Cloud Village replace Guki Namikaze with a Raikage who is not a missing nin. I'm not in the bingo book, the renegade-turned-cage stated softly, bemused by the Mizukage's uncharacteristic outburst. I've checked. I was surprised, and to be honest, a little disappointed when I saw that. Tsunade knew Yasuo was opposed to senseless B, or at least his interpretation of the phrase, so she was surprised by his vehemence. Then she deduced the source of his anger. Kisame and Bunjiro had both left the hidden mist because they disagreed with Yasuo's politics. She could tell the Mizukage felt some responsibility for the invasion of the Takagakure. But even more, the way in which the two surviving broken swords were openly displaying their power could renew dissension in the Kirigakure. Yasuo had to act quickly and decisively to prevent further defections or even worse, an insurrection. Seconded, and approved, Gaara said firmly, and the Mizukage nodded. I vote in favor, too, Mizuno asserted for the record. I, naturally, vote against this proposal, the Reikage noted blandly. The three men started to glance back and forth between the two kunoichi. Neither woman spoke, and Tsunade looked at Mitsuru hopefully, while the Tsuchikage frowned and squinted in seemingly unpleasant contemplation. Removing Guki's followers would only serve to destabilize the region, the leader of the Hidden Stone Village finally said, her gravelly voice sounding as if she were eating something particularly sour, and Guki was appointed Reikage legally. In the absence of proof that his people are acting illegally, I must vote against this proposal. All four sets of eyes turned to Tsunade. Yasuo, Gaara, and Mitsuru looked at her hopefully, while Guki smiled impassively. Tsunade wanted nothing more than to resume her original impulse and slug her traitorous student. She took a deep breath, and forced the word out, abstain. What? Yasuo stammered, looking like Tsunade had hit him instead. 2 for, 2 against, and 1 abstention, Guki stated, the motion fails. Now if you will all excuse me. Without waiting for an answer, the Reikage left. Tsunade opened her eyes, and Mitsuru gave her a knowing nod. Then the Tsuchikage exited as well. The Hokage attempted to escape, but her allies cut her off. What was that, Tsunade? Yasuo demanded, livid, you let him go. I had no choice, the medic said guiltily. Why not? Gaara said more evenly, reading her displeasure. Orders, she growled, yanking the letter back out of her shirt. She tossed it to Gaara, but recited the simple note from memory, even as he read it. Do not take or support any actions against the Land of Lightning, the Hidden Cloud Village, or the Reikage. Signed Hisoka Honokota, she barked. The daimyo of the Land of Fire ordered you not to oppose Guki. Yasuo's last remnants of anger were washed away in a wave of confusion and doubt. And based on the look she gave me, Mitsuru was given similar instructions. The Sannin's fire cooled under the weight of her new assertion. The Kazekage nodded his understanding and agreement with her conclusion. Could the letter be a fake? The Mizukage asked hopefully. I know the daimyo's signature, I checked the stamp, and I recognize the shinobi who delivered it. Tsunade shook her head in denial. I'm as sure as I can be that it's real, without talking to Hisoka-sama in person. Yasuo took off his glasses, and started rubbing the marks it left on his nose. The other two leaders recognized it as an act of frustration. Do you think Honokata-sama was tricked? Or did Guki coerce him in some way? Gaara pondered thoughtfully. I don't know, Tsunade's temper flared again, but I sure as hell intend to find out. How did it go? Kohaku wrapped herself around her husband's arm, pressing her currently modest bust tightly to his left bicep. Guki smiled wearily at the Jinchuriki of the Six-Tails Chameleon, and then nodded at Nagato and Konan. The new Reikage wondered briefly where Madara Uchiha was, but decided he did not care. He walked over to the plush couch in Goro's former office, so he could sit with his mate. Arguably, better than it should have, Namikaze admitted, I was not physically attacked, though it was close once or twice. In addition, it appears the leaf and stone will not be interfering with us for the time being. And without a clear majority there can be no unilateral action against us. He sighed happily, and shifted his gaze to the heir of the Rinnegan. Nagato, do you have enough Shizokas for your pet project, without totally depleting our forces here? Yes, Guki-sensei, the thin young man answered eagerly. Then, I would like you to wait 1 more week, while we cement our hold on the grass and waterfall countries. After that, the Omegakure is yours. Thank you, Lord Reikage. The true pain bowed deeply, an almost idyllic grin touching his lips. Konan smiled too, her lover's joy temporarily banishing her worries. Konan, How is the integration of the cloud ninjas coming? Guki turned his attention to his female apprentice. Not so well as you had hoped, she told him honestly. Even more shinobi have defected to the rebels, and some of those who have not run are trying to avoid taking the oaths. Send out more of the Grey Shizokas, he ordered with a slight frown. We will need the additional troops before we can attack the Sound, Snow, and Mines villages. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.